In today's episode, we're going to talk about what gear and software do you use for recording? Or actually, the major question is, do you record yourself for practicing or playing? Let's go all into it in this episode. Here we go.
Hey there, music makers. I'm Hayes Griffin.
I'm Magnus Sedlund.
And welcome to the Mandolin Secrets Podcast, a show where we take a deeper look at what's happening in the world of mandolin secrets. Each episode will tackle our questions of the week, unpack the latest mandolin secrets lessons, and answer your questions about mandolin, guitar, and all things music. In this week's episode, we're going to be discussing, do you use a rounded pick or one with more of a point? Also, what are the top 3 qualities of your favorite musician? And lastly, do you record yourself practicing or playing, and what gear and or software do you use? Before we dive into this week's discussion, though, be sure to head to mandolinsecrets.com/podcast to sign up for reminders about our upcoming streams. And also, if you can't tune in live, never fear. Just search Mandolin Secrets Podcast on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to get updates when we release a new episode.
All right, and I think it's very interesting how we turned out to the community and asking a bit this question if they record yourself for practicing or playing. And I would even like us to discuss a little bit what is the benefits of recording ourselves. And because there's obviously the question that this will lead into what software, what gear do we use, that is depending of the purpose of the recording, of course. And there is many really good purposes for recording, I would say. But Hayes, is there anything straight away coming from the community that you want to tap into, or what is how do you pick up on that question?
Yeah, personally, recording is something that it took me a while to get into recording myself, because I think a lot of us, and this was the general vibe of the community response that I got too, I think a lot of us are kind of nervous to hear ourselves being played back when we're practicing. You know, we don't want to hear the bad stuff.
No.
But that kind of leads into, you were asking, what are some of the benefits of recording yourself and things like that. And I think that's the exclusive benefit right there. You do hear the mistakes, because when you're in the moment and playing, oftentimes you might know when a mistake happens, but sometimes you might not. You might be playing the tune as normal, and when you hear yourself back, you're like, wow, I didn't realize my tone was so bright, or I didn't realize I was getting some fret buzz or anything like that. Exactly. And that was generally the kind of stuff that I got from people in the community, is that recording, if they did record themselves playing in their practice sessions, it was to kind of hone in on those details,
Yeah. I totally agree. It's like a reality check is the word I like to use for it. I think we're now mainly talking like audio recording, but also video recording is really, really good as a reality check. And I actually, the other day, I've been away playing a lot of music lately, and I had a long train, not to drive, what do you call it? Train ride, it is. Yeah, train ride. And I was listening back and watching, and Chris Thiele workshop that I had recorded from previously. And he also was telling us an advice, always record yourself, even when practicing, so you can listen back to it and see. And he had a nice kind of twist to it, because he said, when you're listening back to it, you will know if you're practicing the right things or not. Because I mean, if you might even play it very clean and just right, so then it's time to move on, sort of.
Yeah. I guess framing it positively like that is a good way to think about it too, right? If you're practicing well, then you can maybe focus less on that one piece of music you've been working on and move to a new one. That's great.
Yeah. And also he had and I'm now talking about this kind of recording yourself in the practice room, really. The reality check recording purpose. Yeah. And he also had this, obviously he was doing it all the time, and he had kind of put his mind into a little mind game, sort of, that every time he pushed that record button, and he was using his smartphone, just as I'm doing, and every time he pushed that record button, it's like he's live to the entire nation. So he puts himself into kind of performance mode as soon as he pushed the button. And that raises the quality of your practice time a lot, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. It's what you're doing there is something that I've talked about with. There was a great jazz guitar like instructor that I worked with maybe about 7 years ago here in Columbus, named Josh Hindmarsh. And we weren't talking about recording specifically, but he was talking about when practicing improvising solos. You know what I mean? He was saying that every time you sit down to play a solo, put yourself on the bandstand. He used to say, you know, like,
yes.
And because that puts you're kind of like hacking your body's adrenal response, you know, like that adrenaline rush that happens. Because if you're live in front of a million people, it's going to be way different scenario with your adrenaline response than if you're sitting alone in your basement recording, you know. I think that's a great bit of advice.
Yeah, it's a great bit of advice, and I like picked up on it immediately. I'm also have a habit of recording myself, but not every day, not every practice session. But this week I've done it, and the good thing is also when listening back to it, you're processing, you're practicing even more efficient than if you're not listening back to it. So it's like if you spend, let's say you have 30 minutes of playing, we call it a practice session. If you record 5 or 10 minutes of that and listen back to it, you have already there increased your practice time. So really worth it. We already touched up on a number of the ways and why it's important for recording.
Yeah, and I honestly can't, like, I always try to do this. I try to play devil's advocate or whatever with myself. Like, is there a reason that you shouldn't record yourself? And I don't even think I can think of a bad reason to do this.
No.
You know?
No.
We have the technology now. Like if Mozart could have recorded himself to listen back to himself, he totally would have. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I feel like we owe it to ourselves since we carry supercomputers around in our pockets all the time, you know?
Exactly. And that actually leads us into the question. So what software and gear do you use, Hayes, for recording? Any like tips you want to share with us?
Yeah. I think for, you know, so just for anyone listening to this that may be thinking about getting into just recording your practice sessions, it simply can be the voice memo app on your iPhone or any, you know, bit of recording software that way.
Yeah.
I have a huge list of voice memos that I keep cataloged on my computer. Usually my practice sessions, I'll listen back and then delete them because I can just take notes on what I need to improve. But you never know if you get a good idea or something in there. So that's a good piece of software, just a voice memo type app. But as far as like studio recording myself at home, I use Logic Pro on my Mac, which is, you know, for you Apple users out there, that's kind of like just the expanded version of GarageBand. And GarageBand is a really great place to start if you don't have a lot of money and you want to get into recording. And then I use a Focusrite Scarlett 18i20 recording interface. It's just like the 8-channel version of their audio interface.
Yeah.
We
put a few notes about this in the show notes because this is interesting, so people can just look back.
Yeah, absolutely, link up to it or whatever.
And yes, the disclaimer: we're not promoting gear here. We're just giving our like short.
Yeah, just saying what we use.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then as far as the microphones go, I was using some Shure SM81, like small diaphragm condenser microphones, but I just recently upgraded to this set of Warm Audio. They're called WARM, Warm Audio WA-84 microphones. They're kind of like copies of the Neumann KM-84, like David Grisman uses for his mandolin and stuff. That's actually what I'm recording this podcast on right now.
Yeah, and I have a similar setup to you, and I'm actually using the Neumann KM-184 as you were mentioning.
And I was gonna say, and that's what's cool. Yours is like the new fancy version, because the KM-84 is like the old one, and then yours has modern treble boost frequency response.
The brightness.
Magnus is fancier than me. You know,
you got that vintage tone.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and we can get all trapped in gear and setting up our home studio and all that. We can even spend a fortune going into this, because it's a trap that we can all fall into, sort of. But I think once we talked about this earlier, Hayes, with our community, then the advice is to use the gear that you have at hand.
Absolutely.
You can get... I mean, you just made an connection to Mozart earlier, and if Mozart had our most simple digital recording setup, he would be amazed.
Absolutely, yeah. If he had the cheapest $50 microphone or whatever, he wouldn't care that it wasn't, the fanciest one out there. So I think that's the main. I'm so glad you brought up this point, actually, because I was watching a lot of gear reviews to look at this new microphone that I just ended up buying recently. Yeah. And if you can get so caught in this gear thing when you're looking at a new piece of gear to add to your studio or whatever, like, I would say start with your price range and your budget. You know what I mean? Like if you've only got a certain amount of money, if you only want to spend $100 or something like that, stick to that and just buy it, because the gear isn't going to make your music sound bad. You can EQ, you can do all sorts of stuff in your software to like compensate for the microphone. Your music isn't going to be held back by, any piece of gear that you have. Just start creating.
Yes, and I think it's also it's for another episode, but it's all about learning some acoustics and sound engineering principles, sort of so placement of the mic, things like that is probably more important than the actual equipment itself. So it's for someone getting into it, we can start pretty basic, and then learn all this other stuff by doing it.
Absolutely. And YouTube is a great resource, just like with anything, right?
Yeah, of course. So one little like gear thing that I would like to add to it. I also record practice sessions and tune ideas and things on my smartphone, and then I'm also using a similar setup with the Logic and all that as Hayes. But I also have one more little gear, and that is a hand recorder. Mine is from the maker Olympus, but it's basically like a stereo mic with a built-in recorder and playback feature and all that. And a hand recorder is very convenient for bringing to your live shows or maybe your band rehearsals or something like that, because it gives you a really, really good sound quality of your recording, but without setting up all this stuff, sort of. So it's as convenient as the smartphone, but with a much higher microphone quality, basically.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that was actually kind of a sub thread that popped up on that discussion in the Facebook group. That people were kind of, I asked like what people record, and naturally the Zoom line of recorders came up there too, which Zoom, Olympus, and Tascam, those are kind of like the three main brands for that stuff. So
exactly,
check those out. That's what I recorded all of my lessons on in college, before we had smartphones.
Yes. Same here.
That's great.
Good. I like it. So then we had another kind of question, not gear related, But you asked, what are the top 3 qualities of your favorite musician? I think it's a very interesting question. And was there any answer popping out for you?
Yeah, there were a couple. I was I think the first person that replied to the thread, Jeff, in the Facebook group, he said that his favorite musician was Tim O'Brien, which I love, right? Because Tim O is one of the best mandolin players and songwriters out there. And to only limit it to 3 qualities, right? That could be tough, but naturally, tone was the first thing that came up for Tim O'Brien, like his touch and his attack on the mandolin. Said, his vocals and his sense of humor on stage. That was another one that he liked. And then it says he knows 500 songs by memory, like words and all. So that's one quality that he dug. But Karen, she also our friend Karen in the group, she put she didn't list her favorite musician, but she did list the quality. She said knows what it seems like an unlimited number of songs in their head. So this is a theme that I saw popping up. You know? And then plays effortlessly, like they were born knowing how to play anything. So I see people using a lot of different words in this thread, but it's like effortless technique or playing, a great knowledge of repertoire, Elliot had another one. Our buddy Elliot said, is comfortable in a variety of genres. I thought that was a really cool kind of style, because that hits for you and me really well, right? Like we don't just play bluegrass or just play Scandinavian tunes,
Exactly. And hearing this, I think also probably what people see in their favorite musicians is qualities they kind of want themselves in their own playing.
I'm so glad you said that.
And I haven't really thought about it that way until I now hear this, and I'm thinking about the qualities of my favorites also. Because I mean, if someone is like appreciating them having a large repertoire, I think that only applies to someone who wish they had it themselves, sort of. Because otherwise, who would care? I'm not sure if.
I think you're right, man.
I'm not. Yeah, but there's something to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so you just said that, and I scrolled down on the feed here because I gave my answer, and there'll be no surprises for this. My favorite musician was Tiny Moore. And then the qualities I listed were 1, melodic phrasing, 2, his tone, and 3, his playful, joyful sound when he plays. And like if I think about those 3 things, I'm like, those are obviously like 3 things that I've like absolutely strive for every time I sit down to play the mandolin. I want to sound like that,
Yes, of course. And I was thinking, I'm actually scrolling here at the same time because lately I've been listening a lot to the new Jacob Jolliff. He released an album. Jacob Jolliff is an very, very progressive mandolin player in my ears. But if I have to pick one today, he's my favorite musician, And so the band then. The new album is called Outbound Plain from the Jacob Jolliff band, and it's an amazing. Have you heard it, Hayes?
I have, I was catching some shots on Instagram of those guys out on tour right now and stuff with Stash Weisslouch on guitar and things like that. Like they sound amazing. You're totally right, and it's. Disclaimer, not bluegrass music, you know what I mean? So prepare to expand your ears and hear something you've never heard before.
That actually is one of the top qualities I put to his music. That is the courage, because you just said it there. Be prepared for something new, and even because there's always like this music polices out there. And the Bluegrass Police, I imagine they can have a lot to say about this approach. And,
absolutely.
and I mean, also the guitarist you're mentioning, his way of soloing is something extra, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny to hear you say that, because I see a lot of comments from the so-called Bluegrass Police out there about Stash and Jake specifically.
Yeah.
And those guys are so cool. Like I know both of them a little bit in person, and they're such humble guys who are just dedicated to getting better at their instrument and playing the music that they want to play.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I don't know if you'll get this, but like when they play some of those solos, it's almost like a wink and a nod to the folks who kind of get that it's not bluegrass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a playful way of like showing that, we're doing something crazy and far out here, not bluegrass.
Yeah, and the word I put it is like courage, because I think there's a lot of courage in the way they are making music. They are not afraid to, and even their music isn't like perfect in the sense that it's clean from mistakes or anything like that. It's so yeah, and he's a brave musician, and I can hear
Absolutely.
it also when he's doing his like the jazz stuff. That is a more, or maybe more sophisticated music in one way, but so much. He knows all the styles and he can move. I guess I'm mixing up all qualities at once, but definitely courage is one of them, and also the probably the main thing is the drive in this music. It's full of so much energy, and it's like the energy and this drive it's the most important thing at all when they play music, and I just get blown away about it.
Yeah. To me, that's what like that drive and energy is what draws me into that music. You know what I mean? It like you can feel the hair stand up on your arms. You know what I mean? And you get that like adrenaline kind of rush listening to it because it's exciting and new and Yeah.
And the last, so 1, 2, 3. The third would be for me. He kind of expresses freedom in a way. And it's probably connected to what we just said, but it's filled with this playfulness and the improvising ideas. He's not bound to any genres. I mean, we know more musicians like I'm thinking of David Grisman, for example, but musicians that have this quality to be so free to do whatever they want, sort of. That's really, it fills up your soul, I think, to hear. And even, I mean, you could think that it's not a quality I hear in every musician, not at all. There's a few musicians that have that real like freedom somehow. Yeah.
No, well, you're talking about the godlike status musicians, right? You know, that have that, the reasons that those musicians hold the like top tier, like the Chris Thiele's, the David Grismans, the Bela Flecks of the world, like all of those kind of people, like they're like superheroes, like literally, why do people love watching Marvel superhero movies and stuff like that, or reading comics? Because the superhero has the freedom to do kind of whatever they can. That's what makes them a superhero. And that's, I think you're describing something that's, that draws a lot of people into playing. They see people like this. And even if they don't know a single note of music or know how to make a chord, they can tell that person has complete command over that little box of wood with strings on it,
Yeah.
So, that's cool, man. I like that.
Yeah, that's cool, and it's very inspiring listening to this, and it's almost inspiring hearing you talk about it, because it's this is why I want to be a music maker.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. Cool. And let's round things up today with that third question. It's the answer to this one is probably not as long as the previous one, but please, would you repeat the third question?
Yeah, so the last question, and this one may seem kind of, what I want to say, simple or dumb after the stuff that we've talked about today, but it says, do you use a rounded pick or one with more of a point? And I think that's, it's almost related to the gear question we talked about a little while ago, but I think it's a very important kind of thing to think about, whether you're playing the mandolin or the guitar, because it has a lot to do with how you use your right hand to attack the string on the instrument. And that's why, David Grisman uses almost a completely round pick, but Tony Rice and, like Adam Steffi and those kind of guys, they use almost a completely pointed pick. So how can three virtuoso instrumentalists land on a different pick shape and still get like an amazing tone out of their instrument, right?
Yeah.
But we had answers were all across the board from like, I exclusively use rounded picks, I exclusively use triangle picks with points, to like a lot of people that are our multi-instrumentalists in the group were saying, I use a rounded pick for mandolin, but I use a pointy pick for guitar, So a lot of those answers. Like, what about you, Magnus? I already know the answer, but talk about your kind of preference a little bit.
Yeah, and I saw a comment about this in the community also. Someone commented, I like using the Magnus Sedlund signature pick, the big triangular. Is that one considered rounded or pointed? And I almost had to think myself what I consider is rounded or pointed, because it's at some point it becomes it depends on the perspective, of course.
Absolutely.
Round is round. We won't argue that, but how much pointed is still pointed? I would say the big triangular pick I'm using is a pointed one, but it's not as pointy as the standard guitar teardrop shape. Yeah. That is too pointy for me. But so I guess it's just very Swedish answer to it, but it's just the middle way, not too pointy, not round, but somewhere in the middle.
Melon pick, right?
Yeah, the melon pick.
That's so Swedish.
Why choose when you can actually have both? Or yeah.
I love it, man. I'm kind of with you though, because like I don't use. I had a crisis of pick this past summer, where I was like going through different pick, shapes to kind of see if I was choosing the right one. You know what I mean? If the pick that I was using was right, and I ended up using, just for the sake of experimentation. Have you seen the Dunlop Jazz 3 pick?
Yeah,
it's one that's it's like
small one.
The small one with like a super sharp point. You could almost like stab someone with the pick. It's like so pointy,
Yes, I know it.
So I used that, and that's like, to me, that's like the extreme of a pointy pick. You know what I mean? That's like as pointy as it gets.
Yeah.
And I found that was too pointy for me. There was like a sharpness of tone, and it almost felt like it was going to snap the strings in half. And long story short, I discovered that the Magnus Sedlund pick, or the Dunlop Prime Tone, or
that
the Blue
shape.
Chip. Yeah, that shape, the TAD shape, if you're using a blue chip, that one is definitely the one for me in terms of tone and feel in my hand. And, I think some people even talked about this, but like the thickness and the mass of the pick matters, like a bigger pick, you get a bigger tone with it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, lots of stuff to consider, right?
It is, yeah. And it's all about experimenting and trying a number of them, but also I think it gives clues for a person's tone if you can see what pick they are using. So if you know what kind of tone you're looking for, and you can see what that player is using, which pick, and you can kind of get a taste of it.
And to build on that too, I think one thing that I missed the entire time I was like coming up and looking at my favorite players and what their gear was. If you're looking at the player, don't just look at what type of pick they use, but look at what angle they strike the string with the pick. Because what I've discovered, and I'm sure people would want to argue me on this one, but like feel free to, the rounded pick players generally hit the string at like the pick is parallel to the string.
Yeah.
And then the pointy pick players like you and me, or pointier pick players, tend to have some kind of angle.
Yeah.
You know, that the pick hits the string. So that's a little clue that I didn't really pick up on until recently, you know.
That's interesting. I gotta pick your brain on this, because I've been also listening a lot to John Reichman lately and watching his right hand technique. He's got the most beautiful tone, but he seems to approach the string with like a negative pick angle compared to us. Do you know?
It's like
do you know the shape of his pick? Do you have?
Yes, it's a round kind of pick that he uses.
Yeah,
like a rounder pick. I had a chance. I taught at a camp with him 3 years ago, and I got to ask all of these questions because I drove him back to the airport. That was like the greatest car ride I've ever had in my entire life.
Oh, I wish I could have a car drive like that with John Reichman.
Yeah, dude, it was pretty awesome. I would ask him like 3 questions and then just let him talk because I knew I was, you know.
Yeah, but that actually connects to what you just said about the pick angle and the shape of the pick. Then. That maybe a more rounded pick, you can have a different pick angle.
True. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very true.
Well. It's not the last time we're talking about this, is it?
I don't think so, man. Yeah, maybe this one deserves its own episode too.
We thought this is a quick question, we said.
Yeah.
No long answer to it. But.
Not with us, yeah.
No. Okay. Okay, thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. We'll come back to these questions, of course, and if you have your specific answer that you want to add to these questions you find inside our Facebook group, Mandolin Secrets, Be a Music Maker. You can find it at Facebook, and if you're not part of it, please come and join us.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to end today's call with, Hayes?
No, I think we've talked for much too long, but thanks for tuning in, folks, and we'll be back in a few weeks for another show. But in the meantime, head to mandolinsecrets.com/podcast for more info on how to keep up with us there. We'll catch you down the line.
Catch you down the line, and always remember, be a music maker.